The restaurant smelled like garlic bread and candle wax, the kind of place my wife picked for our anniversary every single year. I was straightening my collar in the bathroom mirror when I heard her laugh through the wall. That laugh. I'd know it anywhere. My daughter-in-law, Rachel. I stepped out and scanned the dining room for my wife's table. That's when I saw her. Rachel, sitting in a corner booth, one hand resting on her round belly, 7 months pregnant with my first grandchild. But she wasn't with my son, Daniel. She was with a man I'd never seen before. He reached across the table and wiped something from the corner of her mouth. Tender. Familiar. Too familiar. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step going downstairs. I told myself there was an explanation. A cousin, a coworker, a doctor maybe, discussing the baby. I almost turned around and walked back to my own table, back to my wife, back to pretending I hadn't seen anything. Then Rachel leaned in close to him and whispered something. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her face when she said them. She looked scared and relieved, both at once. The man's jaw tightened. He nodded slowly, like he was agreeing to something heavy. I stood frozen by that bathroom door, my own son's wife 8 feet away from me, carrying his child, whispering secrets to a stranger. And I knew, right then, nothing in my family was what it seemed. My wife's voice pulled me back. "Frank, are you okay? You look pale." She was already sliding into our booth, waving down the waiter. I forced a smile and sat down across from her, my back to Rachel's table now, my mind still stuck on that whisper. 31 years I'd been married to Carol. She could read me like a weather report. "You're somewhere else," she said, unfolding her napkin. "What's going on?" I almost told her. The words were right there, but something stopped me. If I said it out loud, it became real. It became a thing I couldn't take back. "Just tired," I said instead. "Long week at the shop." She didn't buy it, but she let it go, which was worse somehow. Carol always let things go when she was planning to bring him back up later, sharper. I ordered a whiskey I didn't need and tried to eat a dinner I couldn't taste. Every few minutes, my eyes drifted past Carol's shoulder to that corner booth. Rachel was wiping her eyes now. The man reached for her hand across the table, and she let him hold it. My son Daniel was probably still at the office. He'd been working late for months, ever since Rachel found out she was pregnant. Overtime, he called it, saving for the nursery. I looked at that stranger holding his wife's hand, and I wondered what else Daniel didn't know. I paid the check 20 minutes early, told Carol I had a headache coming on, which wasn't even a lie anymore. She kissed my cheek in the parking lot and said she'd meet me at home after she stopped by her sister's. I didn't go home. I sat in my truck across the street from the restaurant, engine off, watching the entrance like some kind of amateur detective. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I told myself I was being paranoid. Rachel was a sweet girl. She'd been part of our family for 3 years now, ever since Daniel brought her home for Thanksgiving and she cried happy tears over Carol's pumpkin pie. 20 minutes later, they walked out together. The man had his hand on the small of her back, guiding her around a puddle like she was made of glass. Rachel laughed at something he said, but it wasn't the easy laugh from before. It was tight, careful. He walked her to her car, not his car, hers, and before she got in, he pulled her into a hug that lasted 3 seconds too long for a coworker, a cousin, or anyone innocent. I wrote down her license plate on the back of a gas receipt with a pen I found in my glove box. My hand was still shaking when I did it. Then I sat there in the dark, staring at those numbers, wondering if I was about to destroy my son's marriage or save it. I didn't sleep that night. Carol asked twice why I kept tossing and turning, and twice I told her it was nothing. Around 2 a.m., I gave up pretending and went down to the kitchen, sat in the dark with a glass of water I never drank. Daniel was my only son. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike in the church parking lot. Remembered him at 19 bringing home stray dogs he couldn't afford to feed. Remembered the day he called me crying tears of joy because Rachel said yes to marrying him. He wasn't a man who deserved to be lied to. Nobody is. But I also remembered something else, something I'd buried for months because it seemed small at the time. Back in March, Daniel had mentioned, almost in passing, that Rachel had started seeing a specialist twice a week, some kind of therapy, he said, for anxiety about the pregnancy. He'd seemed relieved she was getting help. I remembered thinking it was a good thing. Now I wasn't so sure that's who she'd been meeting. By morning, I had a decision to make. I could call Daniel and tell him what I saw and risk being wrong, risk blowing up his marriage over something I didn't understand, or I could find out the truth myself first. I decided on the second option. I just didn't know yet how far that decision would take me or how much it would cost. I called in sick to the shop for the first time in 6 years. My business partner, Miguel, didn't ask questions, just told me to feel better. I drove instead to the only person I trusted to help me quietly, my old Army buddy, Ray, who'd spent 20 years as a private investigator before he retired down the road from us. Ray took one look at my face on his porch and didn't even offer coffee first. "Sit down, Frank. Tell me." I gave him the plate number, the restaurant, the whisper I couldn't hear, the hug that lasted too long. Ray wrote it all down in a little notebook like it was any other Tuesday for him, but I could see his eyebrows pulled together when I mentioned Rachel was pregnant. "You want me to run the plate?" Not a question. "I need to know who he is before I say anything to my son." Ray was quiet for a moment, tapping his pen against the notebook. "Frank, whatever this is, you sure you want to be the one holding this information? Some things, once you know them, you can't put back."
I told him I was sure. I wasn't, not really, but I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, and I couldn't sit still while my son worked overtime believing his family was solid ground. Ray said he'd have something for me by evening. I drove home and sat with that fear the entire day, watching the clock, watching my phone, waiting for an answer I was terrified to receive. Ray called at 6:47 that evening. I remember the exact time because I was staring at the clock on the stove when my phone finally buzzed. "The car's registered to a man named Adam Whitfield," Ray said. 34 years old, lives about 15 minutes from your son's place. My chest tightened. What does he do? There was a pause on the line, the kind Ray only used when he was about to say something that mattered. "He's an OB/GYN, Frank. Works out of Riverside Women's Health." The air went out of my lungs. A doctor. Rachel's doctor. My mind raced to rebuild the whole picture, softer this time, more forgivable. Maybe it really was just appointments. Maybe the hug was nothing, just a caring doctor comforting a nervous patient. But then Ray added the part that undid all of it. "Frank, I made a call to a friend at the county clerk's office. Adam Whitfield isn't just her doctor." He hesitated. 9 years ago, before she ever met your son, Rachel was married to him. They divorced when she was 24. I sat down hard on the kitchen stool. Rachel had a whole life before Daniel, a husband, a history, and somehow, of all the doctors in the state, she ended up carrying her second husband's baby under the care of her first one. That couldn't be a coincidence, and suddenly I wasn't just worried about an affair, I was worried about something much bigger. I barely slept again that night, turning Ray's words over and over. An ex-husband who happened to be her doctor. Rachel had never once mentioned being married before. Not at Thanksgiving, not at the wedding, not in 3 years of Sunday dinners at our house. The next morning, I drove to Riverside Women's Health myself. I told myself I just wanted to see the building, see his face for real, instead of across a dark restaurant. I sat in the parking lot for an hour before Adam Whitfield walked out in his white coat, laughing with a nurse, looking like the kind of man who had never lied to anyone in his life. That's when my phone rang. Carol. "Frank, where are you? Daniel just called crying. Rachel's at the hospital." My whole body went cold. What happened? "They don't know yet. Something about her blood pressure spiking. Frank, they're worried about the baby." I drove to that hospital faster than I should have, running 2 yellow lights that were closer to red. My mind kept circling back to Adam Whitfield walking out of that building smiling, completely unaware that his ex-wife was being rushed into an emergency room 15 minutes away. When I got there, Daniel was pacing the waiting room, his tie loosened, his eyes red. He grabbed me the second he saw me. "Dad, I don't know what's happening. She keeps saying she needs to tell me something. She won't stop crying." I felt the truth closing in on all of us, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to be the one who'd uncover it. They let Daniel back first. I sat with Carol in those stiff plastic chairs, her hand gripping mine so tight my fingers went numb. 40 minutes passed before a nurse came out and said Rachel was stable, the baby was stable, but they wanted to keep her overnight for observation. Preeclampsia, she said, manageable but serious. Carol exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since the phone call. I didn't feel any relief at all. I kept thinking about that whisper in the restaurant, about a secret so heavy it might have played a part in putting my grandchild at risk. They let us in 2 at a time. Carol went first with Daniel. I waited outside Rachel's room, and through the gap in the door, I heard Daniel's voice, gentle, scared. "Whatever it is, baby, just tell me. I'm not going anywhere." I heard Rachel start crying again, and then I heard her say something that stopped my heart cold. "Daniel, I need to tell you about Adam, about who he really is to me, and what he told me 2 weeks ago." Carol's hand found mine outside that door. She'd heard it too. "Frank, who is Adam?"
I couldn't answer her, not yet, because whatever Rachel was about to tell Daniel in that room, I realized I already knew half of it, and I'd been carrying it alone for 2 days, waiting for exactly the wrong moment to find out the rest. Carol pulled me into the empty hallway, her voice low and shaking. "Frank, tell me right now." So I told her everything. The restaurant, the whisper, the hug that lasted too long, Ray, the plate number, the ex-husband who turned out to be Rachel's doctor. Carol's face went through every emotion I'd felt over the last 2 days, compressed into 90 seconds. By the end, she had both hands pressed over her mouth. "You should have told me," she said. "You should have told me the second you saw it." "I didn't know what I saw, Carol. I still don't." We were interrupted by Daniel stepping out of the room, his face pale as hospital sheets. He looked at both of us like he didn't recognize us for a second. "Did you know?" he asked. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse than angry. It was hollow. "What no, son?" I asked, even though part of me already knew. "Rachel was married before, to her OBGYN, Adam Whitfield." He said the name like it tasted bad in his mouth. "She just told me. And Dad," his voice cracked, "2 weeks ago, Adam told her something about the baby, something he's been sitting on since her 20-week ultrasound." Carol grabbed my arm. I felt the floor tilt slightly under my feet. "What did he tell her?" I asked. Daniel looked back toward the room, toward Rachel, toward whatever truth was waiting on the other side of that door. "He said the baby isn't mine." The words hit the hallway like a slammed door. Carol's grip on my arm tightened until it hurt. Daniel just stood there, swaying slightly, like a man who'd been sucker punched and hadn't decided yet whether to fall down. "That's not possible," I said, my voice sounding far away even to me. "Daniel, that's not—" "That's what I said." His jaw was tight, his eyes wet. "But Dad, listen to the whole thing before you say anything else." He pulled us both further down the hall, away from Rachel's door, and told us what she'd told him. 2 weeks ago, at a routine appointment, Adam had pulled her aside after the ultrasound. He told her the dates didn't add up the way they should have. He suggested, gently, clinically, that she consider a paternity test after the birth. Rachel had been terrified, not because she'd been unfaithful to Daniel, but because of what she knew, and Daniel didn't. 9 years ago, before their divorce, Adam and she had frozen embryos during a round of fertility treatment. They never used them, never destroyed them either in the chaos of the divorce. The clinic had kept them in storage all this time,
an old file nobody closed. 6 months ago, before Rachel and Daniel had even started trying, Rachel had gone through a rough private week believing she might be sick. She'd had testing done at Adam's clinic. Somewhere in that visit, an embryo transfer error occurred, one the clinic hadn't even caught yet. Daniel's baby wasn't just possibly not his by nature, it might be his wife's biological child with a man she used to call her husband, through embryos frozen nearly a decade ago. "She didn't cheat," Daniel whispered. "She's been drowning in this alone, trying to protect me before she even knew the truth herself." We went back into that room together, all three of us, and I saw Rachel's face when Daniel walked toward her instead of away from her. Relief broke across her like a wave. She had expected him to leave. Instead, he took her hand and pressed his forehead against hers and just breathed with her for a long moment, saying nothing at all. "I should have told you the second Adam said something," she whispered. "I was so scared you'd think I'd done something. I didn't know how to say it without losing you." "You're not losing me," Daniel said. "We're figuring this out together, whatever the test says." Carol squeezed my hand, tears sliding down her face. I thought about that night in the restaurant, the fear that had gripped me, watching a whisper I couldn't hear. I'd been so certain it meant the end of something. It turned out to be the beginning of my family finally telling each other the truth. Adam Whitfield still wasn't innocent in all this. A mix-up at his own clinic, sat on for 2 weeks before he told her. That was a conversation for lawyers, for the medical board, for another day. But he wasn't the man stealing my son's wife. He was a complication from Rachel's past finally surfacing at the worst moment possible. The baby came 3 weeks early, small but strong. A girl with Daniel's stubborn chin and Rachel's same soft eyes, whichever biology the courts eventually confirmed. Daniel held his daughter first, before any test result mattered to him at all. The paternity test came back 6 weeks later. Daniel was the biological father after all. The clinic's confusion had been about timing on paper, not what had actually happened in that room years apart. Adam Whitfield lost his license over the mishandled records and the 2 weeks of silence that nearly cost a family everything. I heard later he moved out of state. I sat with Daniel on his back porch the week after the results came in, watching him hold his daughter, Emma, while she slept against his chest. I told him then about the restaurant, about Ray, about the license plate on that old gas receipt still folded in my wallet. "You were trying to protect me," Daniel said, "even when you didn't know the whole story." "I almost made it worse," I admitted. "I almost let you find out from a stranger's mouth instead of hers." Daniel shook his head slowly. "But you didn't. You waited. That's the part that matters." Carol joined us on the porch with 3 glasses of lemonade, and Rachel came out behind her, Emma's baby monitor clipped to her hip, looking lighter than I'd seen her in months. She caught my eye and gave me a small, grateful nod, the kind exchanged between people who'd survived something together without needing to say it out loud. I thought about that night in the restaurant, the fear that had gripped me watching a whisper I couldn't hear. I'd been so certain it meant the end of something. It turned out to be the beginning of my family finally telling each other the truth.